What's up, everyone? Welcome back to Best Show Ever, the podcast where I interview people about the best concert they ever saw in their life. I'm Cam Herdt. I'm your host. And this week is a really cool episode with an awesome musician and a really nice guy, Sam Grisman, son of David Grisman, legendary dog music mandolinist. Sam is an awesome bassist. He's got his own band right now, the Sam Grisman Project. And we get into some really cool music topics that are just coming from a different perspective than anyone else on this podcast really has. Sam grew up around music. He grew up around Jerry Garcia and his dad playing together, and just has a completely different perspective than a lot of concert goers would growing up around the music. And just a nice perspective into these people as people, not just legendary musicians that we love so much. And so, very cool episode with Sam. I'm gonna stop with the intro here. I'll get out of the way to make room for this awesome conversation that I have with Sam. But first, here's a little bit of music from none other than Jesus and Fartfinger.
This is the best show ever. This is the best show ever. This is the best show ever. This is the best show.
Best show I ever heard.
I think I have to agree.
Yeah.
It's just really been, and coffee.
Yeah.
How about that?
Coffee, hash, weed, music, joy. We try to stay powered off of that kind of stuff.
I don't care what anyone says. Coffee's drugs, dude.
It is.
Coffee's drugs. I mean, I've done drugs and I've done coffee, and coffee's drugs.
Yeah, I agree with that statement 100%.
But that was sweet, dude. I was kind of hoping. I saw the other day that you posted that you were looking for an atomizer for your Puffco, and I was like, I don't know, maybe he'll want to smoke after this or something. Who knows? But,
Or before.
or before,
Or
or
during.
hopefully, or during. Dude, by all means, go for it. Maybe one day we'll even get to smoke IRL in real life together.
That's not a maybe. That's a definitely.
Hell yeah, dude.
What
Well,
part of the country?
I'm in Los Angeles.
Oh, cool. I have a lot of dear friends in Los Angeles, including my buddy James, who works for Puffco.
Sick. Yeah, I mean, moved here like a year and a half ago now, almost 2 years. And I'm from Chicago, and it's just a huge difference. It's a massively different place.
Yeah.
In Chicago is.
That's where my mom's whole side is from too, the North Shore of Chicago. So I grew up visiting Deerfield and Highland Park, Glencoe, and Northbrook.
Oh man, I got a whole bunch of family members right now that are just like,
I love that. Yeah, my mom actually lives in Glencoe now.
oh, cool.
Yep.
Oh yeah.
I grew up in Mill Valley, California, on the foot of Mount Tam, in this cute little house where my dad converted the basement into a recording studio. And so I just grew up, like the luckiest kid in Marin, basically, or one of them.
Pretty much. I mean, is that where you got, so you have that video on your Instagram where you're running around with Jerry and your dad when you're like a baby. Is that from that basement or?
Yeah, that's from the living room that was upstairs from the basement. My sister tried to set up like some sort of monitoring system for the engineer, Dave Dennison, so that he would know when to roll tape, basically, because they set up some microphones for some rehearsals up there, but every once in a while just get really good. I mean, basically all the time it was really good. Who am I kidding?
I know, I'm sure. I mean, there's people who would watch every second of that monitor for sure.
Well, yeah, I mean, they only like ran it for maybe a day or an afternoon, and somehow that footage has been leaked to YouTube, which is great, for me, because sometimes I just get in a nostalgic mood and I want to, I mean, what a privilege to have these videos that really just evoke like the earliest childhood memories. I'm just like running around in pull-ups and there's my dog, and there's Jim Kerwin, my dad's bass player, who really, I mean, my first word was bass. So
That's awesome. That
a
is
huge
so
part
awesome.
of that was because, guys like Jim were in my space playing, beautifully, and I gravitated towards it, So there's like Jim's in there, and Max, the English Springer Spaniel, and Jerry and my dad, and Dave, the engineer, has to like run and get me out of the situation, and you can just see how much love there was in the space and how sweet of a dude Jerry was, and how cool he was with the family, atmosphere.
He had that in his own home, it seems like. And I mean, it's got to be like, if you're making stuff and you're in that certain period of your life, it's got to be like so nice to be around, like that family aspect, and have that, like, that type of joy in the room, before you start making music and stuff. That's got to be so nice. And man, that's just so cool that, like, I don't think anyone has uploaded any of my family videos to YouTube, because no one gives a shit about my dad. About my dad or any of that stuff. But I mean, like, yeah, it's got to be so cool to have, at any moment you can go, you know, check into your old memories and stuff.
It's
It's
surreal.
amazing.
I'm very blessed. And
Was that Go ahead.
it's just a good level. Like, my dad's not Jerry, he's not Phil or Bobby, and he's not Dave Matthews. He's not like a recognizable face, necessarily, or name, unless you really love what he does. And so it's kind of, it was an interesting way to grow up with like a niche famous father,
Yeah.
um
And I mean,
still,
but it's
we can do whatever we want to do, and
yeah.
and obviously, and he's not tremendously financially successful. The
Yeah.
other trappings of that kind of fame aren't there, but we had such a beautiful life, and he's very comfortable, and he's such a prolific artist, and his notoriety never like got in the way of his art.
Yeah, that's the perfect way to look at it too, is because, yeah, those guys, Bobby and especially Jerry, and uh, in that area too, are not able to just be people. They can't just go walk around and, or, have a normal day with your
Not
son
in
in
the
the
Bay
city or
Area.
something.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like you're Jerry Garcia all the time. You're Bob Weir all the time. And so, um, but your dad still got to, perform on like this high level, this massive, undertaking that so many musicians would love to have that chance. And, he is so talented, so he gets to be in that room and make that art, and that's so great. I mean, have you always also been into that world of music, or was there a point where you're like, I need to think about some music on my own terms, or you know
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think when we're kids, there's like a point at which it's really natural for our taste to diverge from our parents, and
yeah,
almost just for the sake of, you know, having a different opinion.
yeah,
And so, I kind of grew up with this sort of unspoken understanding that my dad was really into some of the coolest shit that existed, you know, and also making some of the coolest shit that exists. Oh, there's my dab right just turning off. But, you know, I didn't grow up with a ton of electric music in the household because, of the kind of musician that my dad is, and he has an insatiable quest for musical knowledge and loves musics of all kinds. But in his opinion, there's so much world-class music that's been made, since the advent of recording technology. There's really just not enough time for anyone to process even like a small fraction of it.
yeah,
And so he didn't waste his time on certain corners of the musical experience, that I obviously when I was in middle school or, old enough to really quest for my own sort of musical taste, those were some of the first places I went, And so
Yeah.
I got into some really bad music
Same.
that I thought was great at the time, just because it was so different from the stuff that I'd been raised on,
Oh yeah. Yeah, my dad was a massive Pink Floyd fan. He went to every single Rush tour.
Wow.
He is a huge Allman Brothers guy, and so he was really impressing that kind of stuff on us, and like Frank Zappa, and
Your
all
dad's
the Yes,
yeah.
yes, and all this cool stuff. And I'm like 10. I'm like, this is awesome, and I'm learning why it's awesome. But none of my friends could even come close to like grasping that
Right.
sort of music or thinking it's cool, like you know. And so I also have to listen to Yin Yang Twins at the same
Oh,
time, you know? I also have to start listening to like, I don't know, Cascade or something when I'm like, yeah, like other things that are just, I'm like, I need to make something my own. And then I eventually end up just coming back to the stuff that was my dad's because it's the best. So, but
yeah, that
yeah,
happened to me on a sort of longer, uh, time frame. It seemed like, and underneath it all, I still had this love for all of the shit that my dad was, showing me and teaching me, and that we were listening to together. And so he used to drive me to school in the mornings, sometimes, and we'd be listening to Jimmy Martin records or something like that, like real, just as good as it gets, but also as traditional as it gets, bluegrass music recorded in the 50s and 60s.
yeah,
And as soon as we get to the drop-off circle, I would turn that shit down, because I didn't want anybody to make fun of me for listening to bluegrass,
yeah,
and I didn't quite yet have, the sense of pride that I do now in sort of, the difference of musical opinion, or, in being from a family that, purveys acoustic music, or, niche American music.
yeah. Well, and there's also just something about like there's so much about how music hits you that is it's not necessarily about the medium itself. It's like you're attaching memories to it, you're attaching your mom or your dad or your brothers, your sisters, or your best friends to it. And so it's not necessarily about like it's not always about this is the most skilled musician of all time. Sometimes you just can't get someone to understand how deep of a connection you have to it because you know they don't have that with their dad, they don't have that with their friend. And so but if you could sit down with those kids in your class and be like, listen, this stuff is really the best,
This
just so
is
you guys know.
Sophrony, man. Can't you understand how incredible the banjo kick, JD Crow's banjo backup is, man? That's
7-year-olds.
not really where my friends were at in 1999. They were listening
Yeah.
to Limp Bizkit,
Yeah. You're like Eminem. We were like listening to Eminem and shit. So it's not, yeah.
Yeah.
It's
No,
not, yes, it's not the same.
I remember going to camp, and some kid had the Marshall Mathers record, or LP
Yeah.
or EP or whatever you called it. It was not a LP because it was a CD. But
Yeah.
I just remember, being shocked, stunned, kind of scared, but also like, wow, like
Yeah.
I kind of want this. Like, I don't
Yeah.
know why.
My dad would have no idea what to do with this
I know,
like,
and
type of thing.
it was like sort of a way of being rebellious.
Yeah.
But at the same time,
Definitely.
I was listening to, the Oscar Peterson trio and
Yeah.
Ray Charles and,
Yeah.
all this great music. And my parents are both, high level music appreciators. My mom's not a musician at all, but she was a journalist and, a music lover. And she doesn't really write anymore, but she still loves music. And so, we would have I had these opportunities to go to some shows, really early on. Like my parents took me to go see Elton John in like 1998.
Oh.
And because my dad's friend John Jorgensen was, playing with Elton. He's like a instrumentalist. Probably also lives in LA now. He's just an unbelievable guitar player. He also plays saxophone. He was kind of like the featured soloist on the show. And for like a month and a half or 2 months before the show, we just listened to a bunch of Elton John records in the car, my mom and I, sort of preparing me for this moment. Yeah. And I remember loving that song Honky Cat. And then going to the show and they didn't fucking play Honky Cat, man. And I was so betrayed. Like, how could they not play Honky Cat?
You're just getting to the end of like one of the best sets you could ever see in music. Like just so hit after hit after hit.
Yeah, it was like goodbye.
Incredible ballad. Yeah.
Benny and the Jets, check. Yeah. But they didn't play Honky Cat.
You're like, I don't want to hear fucking Rocket Man. I want to hear Honky Cat. I want to hear some Honky Chateau.
But really what I remember most, because I was 8, was leaving the show early because, my parents, it was getting late and they felt like they had to put me to bed, which is fair enough. But also, this was like pre-key fob technology. So we got out early in the parking lot of the Oakland Coliseum, and it was just full of cars, and they couldn't remember where we parked. And so what I remember most vividly about this Elton John show is just like the fight that my parents got in after the show because they couldn't find the fucking car.
They're just doing the Seinfeld episode. Like you can't beep the car or anything. So you're just like, we just went down this row. We were just on this row. Like, no, this is a different row.
That's what it was.
Oh, yes. Was that your first show?
No, man, I can't remember like the first show that, my parents took me to just to purely be an audience member. But, I grew up going to a lot of shows that my dad was playing. And in that first period of my life, I have all these like fragments of memories, mostly from the Warfield, of just, being either backstage or side stage. And I know a lot of that is like assisted by like stories, and there's not a lot of photos because, we wanted Jerry to be comfortable because he was just a normal guy to our family. So nobody really wanted to, give him the paparazzi treatment. So I have very little like childhood photos of me with Jer. There were professional photographers at our house fairly often to take pictures of my dad and Jerry. And some of those photographers are really close family friends. John Sievert, the late great John Sievert, took most of those photos. He's passed away, but Jay Blakesberg took some of those too, and Susanna Millman. Cool. I could see if they have any, like B-roll, but my mom never wanted to have a camera in Jerry's face, or my sister was dating Justin Kreutzmann for the first few years of my life, and so I know that she and Justin took me to a bunch of Dead shows really early on, and I also have like fragments of like maybe like huge audience scenes from like Shoreline or Oakland Coliseum, but I don't remember like any specific moments from any of those shows. Nor are there
Hey,
any.
What they open with? What was the best jam?
I can't. We're not gonna go down that road on those shows. But my sister does tell me this one story about being at the Oakland Coliseum, and Ornette Coleman was opening for the Dead, and we were out there listening to Ornette, and she sensed that he was about to finish his set, and there's going to be all this commotion and changeover and people going to where they needed to go quickly, and so she wanted to go back to like the family room backstage, and she walked me off the floor, and I immediately started pitching a hissy fit, like screaming and yelling and crying and shit. And she pulled my headphones off and said, "Sammy, what's wrong?" And I go, "I want to go back and hear that jazz." That's like a story that's been like told in my family, that my sister tells, and my dad.
That's gonna be the title of your jazz album when it comes out.
Go back and hear that jazz.
That's incredible.
But
Man, I mean, how could a kid take in that whole scene? Like there's just so much going on.
You can't. And I didn't really understand that scene was an abnormal scene until just after Jerry passed and I started kindergarten. I was like about to turn 6 years old, and it was September of 1995, and I started kindergarten in Marin. And most kindergarten teachers across the country probably are sort of loosey goosey and hippy dippy, and so especially in the Bay Area, like 99% of kindergarten teachers are deadheads, which is a beautiful thing. I didn't understand, like the morning that Jerry passed was the first time, I heard my parents cry, and they found out that he had passed by hearing it on the news, on the local television news. And I didn't understand that, like, Jerry, I didn't gather from that Jerry was famous, I just sort of thought, it's really tragic when somebody dies and they just put it on the news, And then I got to kindergarten, and all of these people who I'd never met in my life were like giving me their condolences.
Man, what a crazy experience for a kid.
It was pretty trippy.
Yeah, that's nuts.
So
then
I
you're like,
thought it was a normal thing, like, that's just a concert,
Yeah, right. Yeah, so you're like, you guys know Jerry too? That's my dad's buddy.
Yeah.
What's with everyone knowing about my dad's buddy? That's crazy.
Right. And my siblings went through a different but similar experience, because they're much, much older than me. And they spent time around Jerry in the 70s, as little kids, in the Olden and the Way era, and just running around in Stinson Beach, like without a care. And they had no concept that, the Grateful Dead or Jerry was, were famous or, world renowned, until they started, seeing Steelies and shit when they like went to high school.
Yeah. I'm like, oh, okay.
Maybe middle school, But
they're like, oh, okay, you guys are into the thing that the little group that my dad likes, or that my dad plays with, or that's crazy.
Because, my dad was never in the Dead, and he was just a good friend of Jerry's, and he played on American Beauty, but that's, because they wanted some mandolin. They didn't have a mandolin in the band. Yeah. And my dad was really serious about, playing his own music, and he never, he wasn't much for just hanging around a scene without a purpose.
Right.
So as much as he loved and appreciated what they had going on, he wasn't going to just like make himself available to the, sort of organic flow of their process, to maybe Because, Wake the Flood, Vassar Clements is on there. Who knows? There could have been mandolin on there. But what is my dad going to do? Just hang around,
Yeah.
Front Street for a decade? He had his own career to forge and, music to make and kids to raise. And
Well, that's that weird thing of when you're an artist and you surround yourself with other artists, and then, sometimes art gets picked up by the masses, and sometimes it's like the major masses, and it's still, whether it's comedy or whether it's, someone writes for TV or they, paint or whatever it is, like, you know, that's still just your friend who makes really great art that you respect, and you know that it's great, and you're happy that everyone else thinks it's great, but it's like, yeah, what are you supposed to do? Just be like an employee to your buddy? Or you're just like, I'm also gonna keep making my own music, and by all means, if you'd like to collaborate, I'm down because we're good friends and you're like family. But it's like it's a little more like good for you, man. Like keep it up, or maybe it's like, man, this is getting too big for you for me to be around type thing.
yeah, I mean, I know that there's something in there that is not the most comfortable for my pop to talk about, and I know that Jerry was just a very non-confrontational dude as well.
Yeah.
And so they didn't see each other for 13 years at one point, and then they rekindled their friendship in maybe late 1989, right around the time I was born. I was born January 12th, 1990. And that was like the year that my dad finished his recording studio, and that was the year that he and Jerry kind of rekindled their friendship and started making records in our house.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like a great time. And those videos that you posted, it looks like a joyful time for Jerry and for your family. And what a cool memory to have. I mean, coming out of your childhood, are you starting to see shows, and like, do you have shows that you remember seeing that were like, man, this is gonna, like, now I'm feeling inspired to
Oh,
make
man.
my own music? Or yeah.
I mean, I was, it's a little different maybe for me because almost everybody I knew growing up was a musician. So
Yeah.
I just sort of, I never had to become inspired to make my own music. I kind of was born into this atmosphere where it was almost like an unspoken expectation, or just part of life. It's like everybody has their own music to share,
Yeah.
like my mom's not a professional musician, but even my mom played piano in the living room, and my sister's not a professional musician, but she had a band where she played wash tub bass, like
That's so funny.
I just,
Very cool.
everybody in my life was a musician, and all
Yeah.
of Dad's friends who would come to the house were musicians, and they would go downstairs and they would record together. So, and I remember early experiences like picking people's shit up, their guitars or mandolins or fiddles, and just experiencing like pinnacle frustration and
Yeah.
and really putting it together really quickly that, wow, all these people who keep coming around, not only do they play music, they've been doing this for years,
Yeah.
they're so practiced, and you need to put in so much time. I knew that from a really young age.
Yeah.
Like, unless I just shed this little toy ukulele thing, I'm never going to be able to make music on this little toy ukulele thing. And I wasn't ready to do that,
Yeah.
I was maybe 4. And my dad, I really wanted to play this bass that had been given to us because my first word was bass. And so people wanted to foster that in me, and so we had this
Sure.
family friend, Bernard Glansbeek. Rest in peace, Bernard. You're the absolute goat. He's the dude who went and ran and found the book of kids songs that my dad and Jerry pulled lyrics from for Not for Kids Only. He was my babysitter. He was the worst babysitter ever. He was like a biker, chain smoked Marlboro Reds, like cussed like a sailor. But he was like had a heart of gold, and he loved dog music, and he loved Jerry, and he moved from Alaska, in the late 80s. He basically just like offered his services to my family because he was such a devotee of dog music.
Wow.
He had already taught all of these Alaskan musicians how to play music through the spectrum of dog music. So there's this whole contingent of these amazing Alaskan bluegrass musicians who know like a ton of my dad's tunes, like heady dog tunes that hardly anybody plays. And that's all.
Your babysitter.
But that's an aside. Like, he gave me this little quarter-sized K bass. It sat in the living room for years, and I would just be super frustrated because I wasn't like even close to being able to reach the fingerboard.
Right.
And so, at a point in time, my dad got a rental cello for me, and he just tuned it backwards because cellos are tuned like a violin or a mandolin in fifth.
Oh, okay.
And so he tuned it in fourths like a bass, or like, the bottom four strings of a guitar. And he just immediately started like teaching me how to play bluegrass time,
Wow.
which is pretty rudimentary. You basically play the root and you play the fifth underneath it.
Yeah.
And that's all you need. And all the greatest bluegrass records of all time basically have that. And the guys who do that really well, there's a whole art to it, and it's not just simply that. There's like passing tones and runs. And I mean, so much of it is tone and time though. And
I was just going to say it's all feel and all time. It feels like, yeah. So you either have that or you really don't,
Right. And also I was really young, and my dad was still my dad, and he didn't sugarcoat it for me. And so even like from the first time we played music together, he like told me I was rushing or told me I was dragging. It wasn't just
whiplash.
It wasn't
whiplash in your house.
Everybody gets a trophy and everybody's so good at music. It was like straight up like, you're not doing it. Like, this is how you do it. And so,
I mean, think about like parents do that with language, with their kids. They're like, use your words. That's not how you say this. Like, you're trying to like teach kids how to not say like, baby words. You want them to say words. And like your dad is basically teaching you that language. He's like, close, but
that's exactly what it is. I mean, music is just another language, and it's definitely a language that everybody understands. It's just not one that everybody has the patience to comprehend how to speak.
Yeah. And it is that. I mean, I played guitar growing up, and I describe what I do as youth pastor guitar. I do like I got like open chords, and that's it. Because it, like you said, when you said pinnacle frustration, I mean that like struck a chord in me, because it's like that's exactly what learning music is. You have to break through this like massive frustration of not being able to speak the way you'd like to, or not being able to like, you're like, I know what I'd like this to sound like, and it's not even fucking close right now.
And it will take years for it to get even close.
Yeah. And so I do jokes instead. That's my thing.
But you know what? Jokes are needed, and your jokes are great. And also, I bet you your youth pastor guitar playing is pretty great too. And like, that's all you need to play some of the world's greatest music. Open chord.
Oh,
I mean, what do you mean? Just
that's the thing. I mean, it's just like anything else. If you
chords. I'm looking for a capo on my table right now. Maybe not.
Well, I would have assumed you had a capo like strapped to the laptop, to be honest. So
I mean, I'm a bass player, so I don't really need a capo. But that doesn't mean that I don't fuck around on the guitar from time to time.
Of course, you got it, dude.
Rachel plays some guitar too.
Nice. Well, through so now like when you get into music and you're starting to like play music, are obviously all the inspiration is around you, right? Like all of your family members are musicians. Your dad is a musician. You got all this inspiration from this massive community. Was there any time you went and saw like your dad live or someone live and you're like, this is breaking through what I've seen of them in my house. Like this is at a live performance level, they're tapping into something that I've never seen them do, like in front of these people right now.
That's a really good question. Um, I definitely remember uh, going to see my dad and the Flecktones play at the Warfield when I was like 9 with my best friend Henry, who would come to the house often, and hang out on sessions. Or his dad, Mike Moser, was a really dear friend of my dad's, and he actually designed the acoustic disc logo for my dad. He was like a genius, creative advertising mind. And
Cool.
I grew up with his sons, Henry and Jack, who are still two of my like dearest friends. And so we discovered a lot of music together. And I remember we were really into Victor Wooten, like really into sort of like flashy pyrotechnical but beautiful bass playing, but not the
Yeah.
kind of bass playing that I gravitate towards in my real life. But
Right.
my 9-year-old self was like, couldn't understand how this shit was being played, and
Yeah.
just in my mind. And my dad my dad was really good friends with Bela, and he got me all these like Victor DVDs and stuff, and Vic like signed them to me, and he was just such the sweet,
Cool.
most encouraging guy, And then we would, my dad would play co-bills with those guys in that era, and so I would get to see them fairly often. And I just remember going to see the Flecktones,
Yeah.
when I was 9 with my best buddy, and just watching like Bela and Victor play the Sinister Minister, and just play all this like he was doing all this tapping and slapping, and at the end of it all, he flipped his bass, around his back and attached to the strap, and I just like lost my 9-year-old mind completely. And it
Hey,
wasn't
dude.
really linked to it didn't turn on a switch like I got to do that. It was just like I took in the moment, and everybody was going crazy, and it was this room, full of people, and I just was, I was awed by the moment and inspired. Wow, like that's Bela's friend. I'm watching it
Yeah.
with my friend. Bela's my dad's friend. This is just something you do with your friends, like
Yeah.
this, something to aspire to, I suppose.
Yeah, and like seeing a guy like that is like he's like the Eddie Van Halen of bass, dude. It's like it just opens like, oh, there's way more even possible than I even thought
Yeah.
on this instrument. Yeah, man. Victor Wooten's fucking sick.
He is one of the absolute guts, and just the sweetest dude. And really, when it comes down to it all, he really is just about playing some dope, simple, like repetitive bass, like bottom shit,
Yeah, like just powerful, like what it's supposed to be.
But he
But he
can
can
do it all.
also he can truly do it all. Do you think that was your best show ever?
I'm sorry. O'Teal is very similar. He
Oh
can
yeah,
do it.
yeah.
He can do it all, but you know, he knows that what serves the song best in a lot of instances is playing some simple, low bass forward stuff. And that's sort of what makes me fall in love with playing the bass and being a bass player.
I mean, there's a really interesting part of there's a documentary about the Chili Peppers when they're making Blood Sugar Sex Magic, and Rick Rubin is producing that, and he's like, I'm gonna slow you down through the verse, Flea, and you're just gonna play the bass line so that we can open you up later in the song. You have to build to those moments. And like the best musicians know that, you do that within a set, right? You have ballads and you have dance songs and you have stuff that you get people excited and bring them down. You can do that within the bass line of the song. It's what Rick Rubin was trying to teach Flea. And I mean, yeah, dude, I one love that documentary, and two, you can use that lesson for so many things artistically,
Big
and
time.
who's gonna try to slow down Flea? Like that shouldn't be like the
Well,
move that you make, but it's the right one.
I love that you just mentioned Flea, because that's kind of the next, or one of the next shows I was kind of wanting to share with you, was that my brother Monroe is a total rock and roller, despite the environment he came from. And he's like an absolute rock and roll historian and a great rock and roll guitar player and singer. And, he's really into Zappa, really into Rush, really into just great rock and roll of all kinds. Like he and his wife, April, my sister, they like were really into Prince, and
Cool.
got to do some epic, like secret Prince shows. He's just led a very fulfilled rock and roll life.
Nice.
And he hipped me to a lot of the great rock and roll music. And he saw fucking Van Halen in like 1985 or something. I mean, he was on it. Saw Rush in that era. Bobby and Jerry gave him his guitar rig for like he used in his high school rock band.
Whoa. So this guy's tapped in. He gets it.
But, he's my brother, and he grew up, in a similar environment 20 years earlier, and so he, got to walk into Front Street because Jerry told him, there was a hard trucker he could have. And Bobby saw him like walking out, like struggling to walk this thing out, Bobby's walking in and he goes, "Hey man, like there's no speakers in there." And he just goes, "Oh, Jerry told me I could take this. It's fucking cool. I'll find some speakers. It's great." And he goes, "Nonsense." And like turns him around, walks him back into like some other locker and just like pulls 2 JBLs off the rack and just like gives them to him.
So sick. I mean, a dream, dude.
Yeah. But I mean, he had a band called Sapphire, and that was like the rock band at at Tam High.
Yeah. Sapphire.
There's like pictures of my brother like shredded with his shirt off in his high school rock band. I'm like, and I grew up seeing those and being like, this is just that's just his music, he was in a band called Gahunza in the early 90s. And like my dad's like wearing Gahunza shirts on like Warfield shows with Jer and shit. My dad's like the most supportive father, in the way that he can be musically, but also has like really harsh musical opinions.
Yeah.
And so like rock and roll was kind of like not really tolerated like in his space. So my brother took me to rock shows, and my brother took me to go see the Chili Peppers in probably the year 2000. And my buddy Henry Moser came with us. He was my best friend growing up. And we would, we went to guitar lessons together. I brought my bass and he brought his guitar, and we had this dude, Kevin, would just like show us repertoire. So we would jam on like Hey Joe and stuff like that.
Nice. Yep.
And, when we were like 8 and 9, and then we went, I remember getting off of my dad. This was how supportive he would be. He knew that I loved the Chili Peppers. He just didn't really want me to like listen to it in the car or anything like that. And my parents were divorced. So he like bought off of eBay this DVD of like all of this, like basically bootleg Chili Peppers shit that had been taped off of the TV, including that Rick Rubin interview or documentary thing,
In black and white.
Yeah. And And so like we would watch that together. Then the Chili Peppers came to town. It was like right around the time that I guess One Hot Minute came out.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
It was before Californication, which I thought
Right.
was like the downfall of their like recorded stuff. Like that's kind of when I stopped loving the Chili Peppers. I was really about that Blood Sugar Sex Magic type of vibe.
Oh my, so funky, so full, like such a great fucking album, dude.
And also like that One Hot Minute record doesn't have John Frusciante on it, but it does have Arrow playing on it. And that shit's hella funky. And I loved that. And it also has this song P on it, P-E-A.
Yeah.
It's like just Flea solo, and he's like, I'm a little P. Like I just remember loving that song for some reason, probably because it just takes a turn at a certain point, and it goes, and I'm a pacifist, so I can fuck your shit up. And we
Flea
probably
song.
the fact that it said fuck on a record, you know, that we owned when we were 9. But I just remember my brother took us to the Chili Peppers show.
Yeah.
It was fucking epic. They played P of all things in the middle of their
Oh man. The crowd just had to be like, so I'd like screaming that fuck your shit up
or
line.
not. I don't remember. It was like probably a weird play for them, like,
Yeah.
you know, because the other than that, it was like Give It Away Now and just the most classic fucking Chili Peppers, Under the Bridge and stuff, you know.
Just a bunch of fucking heat out of them.
I still love the Chili Peppers, man. I mean, they're those dudes do what they do at a very high level, and Flea is a super inspiring cat. He's very grounded and in the art all the time.
Yeah, he is a very inspiring guy, and like another great example of just some musicians that are just dedicated to that group and staying together and keeping it fun for each other, and they just have a sick book of music on top of that,
They
which
do.
helps.
They do.
Do you have in your life a best show that you ever saw? Do you think it was that Chili Pepper show or?
That was a great show, but that can't be the best show I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah.
I've seen some incredible shows. Like I got to watch David Byrne from Side Stage at like a festival that I played at, you know. And I played on like some shitty small stage, but I noticed that all the artist credentials were the same. So I just like, as soon as we were done, I just like stood on the deck on like the main stage and just like waited for David Byrne's set. And
Man,
it was like 15 people like with instruments strapped to them. Like, you know, the drum set was deconstructed and there were like 3 drummers playing like one kit part basically. And doing
that American Utopia.
It was the dopest shit I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah. I saw that tour too. It was fucking awesome. Just brilliant.
From an entertainment perspective and just like a show experience type of vibe, like it's really hard to top that. But
yeah,
you know, just from like the show that comes to mind that kind of checks all the boxes for me, particularly just as such a bluegrass nerd and you know, someone who comes from like a lineage of new acoustic music and somebody who like loves Tony Rice's music so much. I was lucky enough to be at the Rocky Grass Festival in 2006 when Jerry Douglas put together a Manzanita reunion show.
Whoa.
I don't know if you're familiar with the Tony Rice record Manzanita, but it's sort of Tony's like best solo sort of instrumental. The song Manzanita is one of his like, you know, quintessential guitar instrumentals, but also like that's a very exceptional record for many reasons, but you know, he sings a few tunes on it. Otherwise there's some fiddle tunes on there that he just absolutely obliterates. And just every song that is on there is just so expertly chosen. All the guitar kickoffs and backup are just so impeccable. and there's no banjo on it. And for a full-length bluegrass record, that's really, really odd.
That's crazy.
And I think maybe J.D. Crowe had even been like hired for the session and couldn't make it or something, and that's why there was no banjo on it. And the core of the band is Jerry Douglas, Sam Bush, Todd Phillips playing the bass, Tony, obviously, and then my dad's on some of it, and Ricky Skaggs is on some of it, but neither of those guys were at Rocky Grass that year. And Tony lost his ability to sing. He used to be like the world's greatest bluegrass singer. He lost his ability to sing in the late 80s, early 90s, and by like the early 90s, he had dysphonia in his vocal cord. And so he just stopped being able to sing, and his talking voice kind of changed over to something like this. And so they had Dan Tominski come play rhythm guitar and sing lead on a lot of stuff, and he was in Alison Krauss's band. He's like the dude on that weird Avicii song, the Hey Brothers song. He's like he's an amazing bluegrass musician and a really cool dude, and just an absolute powerhouse singer. And so there wasn't really anyone better they could have gotten in that department. I guess Todd Phillips wasn't available to play bass, so they had Barry Bales, who also played in Alison Krauss's band, who's just he's just solid as a rock. He's also like 6'7", so his end pins on his bass, like his end pins like 3 feet long. It's classic. And Jerry Douglas, was kind of my original favorite bluegrass improviser. Like when AOL Instant Messenger was a thing, my screen name was Jerry Doug 3. And like Stuart Duncan, the fiddle player, is sort of my favorite improviser in any idiom. He's just the world's tastiest bluegrass fiddle player, but he's not limited by any genre. And he's probably like one of the most recorded session musicians in the history of Nashville. And so is Jerry Douglas, and he plays the dobro. Not very many people play the dobro. And I just love that sound, probably partially because I'm a bass player and there's not a huge like library of recorded bass solos to pull vocabulary from in bluegrass. And so I'm always looking for other fretless instruments, and for repertoire. So when I was like really practicing bluegrass vocabulary, I would learn like Stuart Duncan solos or Jerry Douglas solos. Anyways, Jerry Douglas put together this band, and I was just, in the poser pit with some of my dearest friends, with Dominic Leslie, who's one of my favorite mandolin players on the planet, who plays with Molly Tuttle these days. And we've been friends since we met at Rocky Grass when we were around 10, but we really connected at the Mandolin Symposium in 2004. And Alex Hargraves was also there, who I've known since he was 9 and I was 11. We met at a bluegrass festival, called Wintergrass, but he plays with Billy Strings now. And so if you can just picture me and Alex and Dom and probably George Meyer and probably Sarah Jarose and some of our other like just bluegrass kid mafia sitting sort of front row center for this Manzanita tribute set, that at that point in time, Tony Rice used to no-show like more than George Jones. So like nobody knew if Tony was going to be there for his own sort of tribute set. That was like the, 8 o'clock set at like Rocky Grass, which is the sister festival of Telluride, which is one of the bigger, more beautiful, well curated bluegrass festivals in the world, and we're all just like, are they really going to play Manzanita? Is Tony going to be here? And Jerry comes out on stage by himself and starts to explain the thing. And he says he, picked up the phone and called some friends. And he says, I called Sam Bush, and Sam Bush comes out, it's like, all right, Sam's here. Great. Awesome. And then, he says, we needed a fiddle player, and so I called, Gabe Witcher, who plays in my band, and I called, Barry Bales to play bass because Todd wasn't available, and he goes, I called Tony Rice, and he said, I don't talk on the phone anymore. I do this new thing called Tex, Tex.
2006.
And then Jerry Douglas, on stage is like, so I text Tony about it, and Tony's here, it's
No, what?
huge relief, to everybody in the audience and us. And I knew we were going to have our minds blown anyways. And that record starts with this song, Old Train, which just has like the most quintessential Tony Rice kickoff ever.
Yeah.
And I remember they started with Blue Railroad Train. And I was like, fuck, like,
Yeah.
are they just not going to play the, and they didn't play it in order, but then like the fifth tune, in between songs, you can kind of hear Tony like making sure he's got that kickoff right,
Yeah.
And he just launches in it. It's just perfect, And
Yeah.
it was just like one of those moments. Like I was with some of my best friends, and we were watching. Our friend Gabe Witcher was up there playing fiddle with these guys, and so we were like really stoked for him, even though he's much older than us, and but he's still sort of like in between the generations, and it was just one of these awesome moments, like watching these guys who are my heroes, but also like dear family friends, play this material that they recorded in the 70s with my pop, without my pop, but it was just so great,
Yeah.
Like rushed to the stage after the show and went back, and I got the set list, and I still have that somewhere.
Cool.
All those guys to sign it for me too.
Really cool. And like when you get an opportunity to see, there's albums that shape your life, and there's albums that shape who you become. When you get to, a lot of those for guys like me and you who are younger dudes who like, stuff that was made a while ago, when you get a chance to see that album presented, we've talked a little bit about Zappa, and Dweezil will put together his dad's records, and he'll do them like exactly how they, he'll be like Roxy or Elsewhere, and he'll do the whole thing, and it's just such a treat to like, you're like, I never thought I was going to see this song live. And it was enough just to hear it. It was enough just to like know that it was composed and have it on that record. But this is, it's just such a treat, and also having that added bonus of like seeing like being proud for your friend who also has a reverence for that music and is just nailing it. I'm sure, you're out there just watching him kill it.
Absolutely destroying,
Yeah.
And they had Daryl Anger, who played on the song Manzanita on the record, come out and play Manzanita because he happened to be at the festival. Man. And it was just a really special set. And it wasn't a long set, but it was just really, really well done. And I just remember like absolutely floating after that. Just being like, that was fucking unbelievable, just got to hear these guys do that.
Yeah.
And, that'd been a record I'd probably listened to 200 plus times. So.
Oh yeah. Yeah, man, what a treat. What a cool moment. And I'm sure that's music then you just going to go home and play. Like after you see it live, you're like, I got to go home. And
I know we went to the campground and we played some of those tunes right afterwards.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And just screaming them at the top of your lungs, I'm sure, because you're just stoked,
Yeah, that was a beautiful thing. I had a really, speaking of just records getting played down in their entirety, my brother is a legend for this too. He took me and Henry and our buddy Michael Narofshin, who was in our band called ID, when we were 14. We used to play like Battle of the Bands and shit.
And heady name for a 14-year-old band, dude. ID.
So ridiculous. And my brother took us to the Greek to a Primus show. I used to love Primus, and I still do.
Yeah.
But sort of after the Chili Peppers, I sort of like graduated to Primus.
That's how it goes.
Um,
That's how it goes.
and my brother took the three of us to this show at the Greek, and it was like May of our 8th grade year. And I just remember just getting like middle school high.
Right. So the highest you've ever been of all time.
Yeah. And my brother drove us to the Greek, you know, just treated us like kings, drove us right there, got us good tickets.
Yeah.
And set one was just a normal Primus set. And then set 2, they just played the whole Frizzle Fry album down.
Oh my God, dude. Yes.
Which was like my absolute fucking shit, you know.
Oh yeah, dude.
Time and all that kind of shit. Like, was my 14-year-old self, I was like obsessed with that.
Was it like they start with the first
Oh yeah.
opening track?
Which
So then when they get to that second song, are you like,
Yeah.
oh fuck, they're gonna play the whole thing?
No, they literally did. They played the whole
Oh
thing.
man. Sick. So sick. I got to see Primus like 2 years ago, and they did the same thing. Primus set to start off was really great. We were really close, Chicago theater, and you know, yeah, they're all incredible. But you know, Les Claypool live, you know, he's just yeah, effortlessly cool, like a Victor Wooten type of a thing, just like pulling
How are
off
you
stuff. You're
doing
like,
all this
what?
shit and singing all this shit? And what are you even saying?
Yeah.
What is going on? What time signature are you guys playing in?
The second set they did Farewell to Kings, or I don't know what Rush album, and they just, you know, it's after Neil Peart died, and so it was just fucking the coolest thing ever, man, to watch. Yeah, to watch those guys operate. They're such a good band still to this day. If you get a chance to see Primus, if you didn't see him this summer, go do that, dude.
Please go see Primus. They actually closed that show with YYZ.
No way.
Like after they played the album, they just got off stage and then they came back and played YYZ Encore.
What an encore.
I
That's
know.
the
And
best encore you could.
my brother's like a massive Rush fan, and like his buddy had a show and a radio show in high school called the Rush Hour.
Nice. Maybe I should change this podcast to that. I feel like I talk about Rush a lot. It should be the Rush Hour instead.
That'd be great.
I'll get Rush fans all riled up. Well, dude, I mean, do you have anything coming up that you're excited about? I mean, I know you just hopped off tour today, but anything coming up that you're stoked about, or?
Man, I'm excited about a lot. We're gonna be playing a bluegrass festival that we actually played our first gig at last summer, before this Sam Grisman Project band was really a band. And so that's going to be a special happening. It's called the Green Mountain Bluegrass Festival, and we're playing on Friday, the 18th of August. And that's up in Vermont. And after that, about a week later, on the 26th of August, we're playing in Vashon Island, Washington, or on Vashon Island in Washington. At a little one-day festy there, and that's only a couple hours away from where my dad's living these days. And so I'm hoping we might get a little special guest appearance.
Oh man,
It's
that'd be crazy.
Hard to get him away from the house, but you know, the promise of playing some good dog music and maybe some Garcia Grisman tunes might pull him away.
That's super exciting, dude. And special thing to share with your pops.
Yeah, I mean, that's, you know, the thing that I'm missing the most right now is kind of playing music with him. And you know, he's got a different mentality just because he's 78 and, you know, he's not really enthusiastic on the whole travel component of gigging.
Sure.
And so he's not bummed to not be playing a ton of shows, you know, or really any shows. And, you know, we just played the 65th gig of the year, and we're going to definitely get to 100 before the year is done. So we've got a little different ethos operating. But I just really miss playing music on stage with my dad and, you know, getting to experience the love and appreciation that the audience has for him, like with him. That was something that was starting to happen at a sort of more universal level, like right before COVID kind of came and shat on everything. And then, you know, he just didn't really want to reschedule a lot of his work because it all just seemed like too much of a hassle.
Sure. And yeah, I mean, you get to a certain age, it's like the the thought of having to leave your house and travel a lot. I mean, that's a lot. It's a lot to do. So, but I do hope for you and for that audience in Washington that you get a little chance to have that in August here, man.
I mean, I'm gonna go get a whole week of it before the show.
Yeah.
Because we have the time between Green Mountain and that gig off. So Rachel and I are gonna fly to Washington and go spend some time with my dad and Tracy and the great Danny Barnes, who lives pretty close by. And so hopefully we'll get to make some music.
Man, sounds like a blast, dude.
We also have a gig coming up this fall that I'm really looking forward to in Denver at the Mission Ballroom with our good friend California Honey Drops. We're going to be supporting them at their first Mission Ballroom play, but I've just heard so many great things about that venue, and I love that band, and I love the Front Range of Colorado.
Yeah.
And really looking forward to that as well.
It looks like such a cool venue. I want to get out there for a show so bad. When's that?
That is on October 10th, I want to say. Or no, November 10th.
Okay. Well, this will be out after those shows you do in Washington, and after that time you spend with your dad, but it'll be out before that show. So if you're listening to this episode and you're in
Awesome.
Colorado, go check out Sam at the Mission Ballroom. It's gonna be sick.
Yeah, we'd be honored. Yeah.
Don't miss out on that. You just listen to the whole episode. Why would you miss out on that?
Well, the whole episode, except for we skirted around one topic.
Oh, we did.
The worst show?
Oh yeah, man. What's your I felt bad for holding you for so long. So I was gonna close it off, but do you have a worst show that you ever saw in your life?
I do. I was thinking about it in preparation for this talk, and you know, I don't love throwing other musicians under the bus, but I don't think they're going to be any worse for it. And when I was 16, that Gnarls Barkley song "Crazy" came out.
Oh yeah.
And everybody was crazy for that song. And I didn't particularly like the band, but I kind of dug the tune, and I wanted to, you know, go to a show with a friend who didn't really like the kind of music that I normally listen to. So I brought him to the Fillmore to go see Gnarls Barkley in 2016 or 2006.
What a venue for the Gnarls Barkley show. Like, wow. I don't know where else you do that in San Francisco, but like, damn.
It's funny. I vividly remember this show, but I kind of thought it was at the Independent, which wouldn't really make any sense. And then I looked it up, you know, on setlist.fm. I'm like, Gnarls Barkley 2006, San Francisco. Yeah. Sure enough, it was at the Fillmore. And I did find an article that referenced what pissed me off so much about this show, actually.
Oh, I love it, dude.
So basically, I was stoked to go to the show because it was like a full, like 10-piece band playing hip hop, which I usually love. And I dug the tune off the record and maybe a couple other things off the record. I kind of, I was like, all right, this is gonna be cool. Doors opened at 8 for a 9 show, and we were 16, so we had to get like X's on our hands, and we couldn't leave. Like
Oh
no
man.
re-entry for minors. So that's really what screwed us over, because like we couldn't go leave to get high. So we were just stuck in the Fillmore from 8 on, and then 9 rolls around, and like I don't even think their stage was like really set up. Like,
man.
and so they didn't come out until 10:30.
Oh.
And we'd already just been standing for 2.5 hours.
There's nothing worse than that pre-show anxiety, dude. And you're just like, what is happening? Everything I've done is wearing off. I'm just feeling my lower back and it sucks.
But everybody else was kind of disgruntled because like an hour and a half is just, way too long to
Yeah.
push.
It is.
And they started, and they did have a 10-piece band, but the sound was like, it was like a cacophony of sound. It was just like terrible.
Oh.
Basically, part of what they were doing was, I guess, is it DJ Logic who's in that band? It's like a famous DJ in that band. He was just like, whatever he was sending to the front of house was just like excruciatingly loud. And everybody else was like having to play to that like decibel level, like guitars and, stuff like that. And it was just brutal, and like hurt to listen to. And they didn't play Crazy until the last song, dude.
What are you doing?
I just remember being like, oh, what did I just do? Like, what have I done with my life? Like, I don't even like this song that much. Why am I still here? And I couldn't convince my buddy that we should leave because, well, they haven't played Crazy yet.
They gotta play Crazy. Man, why did everyone have that album too? Like everyone loved that song and I had that album and I listened to it. Man, I saw them live too and it was tough. I don't know. I don't know what was going on with that show, but like I think we know why Gnarls Barkley isn't around still, and it was probably that tour.
Yeah. Not a good vintage for old Gnarls Barkley. But it was, hey, I'm sure somebody loved that show.
There's a couple people right now that are like listening to this, like, what? I loved that show, dude. The Gnarls Barkley 06 show, that's my best show ever. No, I'm sure there's no one there's no one doing that.
Yeah. I'm sure this'll be an atypical episode because, my best show ever wasn't a Fish show or a Dead show or another one show but it was a Tony Rice show that we didn't know Tony Rice was going to show up to.
If you can believe it or not, Fish and the Grateful Dead get discussed on this show pretty often. So I think we're all good. I think we're all good.
I wish I remembered.
There's other people talk about Fish.
I wish I remembered a Road Jimmy or something like that, but I just didn't have that experience.
But those memories are great, and the family stories are incredible, and I'm just lucky to have you on, man. I'm glad you were able to take some time and talk to me about your experience. Not a lot of people had the childhood experience that you have, and there's a lot of people who have a lot of great love of music, and so just super cool looking at that, man. And I appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks for talking, man.
That was the best show ever. That was the best show ever. That was the best show ever. That was the best show.
Man, there was some fucked up stuff in there.
Yeah, what the fuck was that about?
Well, that was some really good music from Jesus and Fartfinger, but also a really great conversation with Sam. What a great dude. I mean, such a great conversation and just has the coolest stories you could ever have. Um, can't wait to actually hang out with Sam. We ended up talking for a while after this call, just because he's such a cool, nice guy. Um, like we were saying, if you get a chance, go see Sam at Mission Ballroom. That's going to be an awesome show in a really cool venue. Um, and if you like this conversation, there are a ton others like it. Go look at all the other Best Show Ever episodes, and follow Best Show Ever on Instagram. We've got updates coming all the time and funny little things to watch and all that kind of stuff. So until next time, guys, have a good show.